screen? Do you hear me well? And do you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you very much. The DARPE, first of all, welcome to DARPE webinars. And thank you so much for attending our event today and for your interest. And just to give you 5 minutes, in the first 5 minutes, just to introduce DARPE. And then I will leave the mic and the presentation for our partner, Qualisus from Lebanon, a consulting firm working in development consulting and doing a lot of many things, including monitoring and evaluation, and fundraising and resources mobilization, and a lot of other support services. So first, let's meet. And I would like everyone to mute himself, please, so people all we can listen correctly and perfectly. So DARPE is a portal, and actually a website. We use IT technology in scouting, aggregating, and collecting data from please mute your mics. Please mute your mics before you go in. So DARPE, it's a platform of the Middle East, and we aggregate data from everywhere, from 850 and even plus sources of donor agencies, non-governmental organizations, international organizations, corporate funders, Arab foundations, everywhere. We aggregate everything and we classify so it makes searchable. Non-governmental organizations, members of DARPE, consulting firms, members of DARPE, public agencies, members of DARPE, think tanks, again, members of DARPE can easily filter and search what they want. They're saving their costs, saving their time, and of course, they will not lose any single opportunity they have been waited for to bid for and write a proposal and win. So actually, our DARPE is mainly we work. How DARPE works? It works into 4 phases of business development and proposal development, and partnership and building trusted partnerships. So we care about building partnerships that not any partnership trusted, and to be able to have a trusted partnership, you have to have informed partnership. And how DARPE works goes from scouting, in which you identify tenders and grants and individual consulting opportunities per your selection criteria. Then you have these opportunities are linked to the profile of the client, of the donor agency, with all contact information, with all previous procurement notices of this Mr. Client or Mr. Donor Agency or the international organization. So you can learn more about their funding priorities, and you can learn more about their direction, so you know how then you tailor your proposal accordingly. And this is what we call starting an informed partnership, and this is what you call you have a trusted partnership. Even in your proposal writing, you start showing this trust, and this trust you are start showing, building this trust by showing how much you know the project, you know the donor agency requirements. When I'm saying a client means donor agency or international organization, whatever their position in the whole development ecosystem. Of course, as I want to mention that DARPE only focus on the Middle East. So we have everything from the smallest to the largest opportunity, from the smallest to the largest organization database, organizations profiles. Even we include corporate funders as well as private consulting firms, local and international consulting firms. So we can connect all together. And then after that, after learning more about the client, you start, we have a positioning, and usually people start putting webinars online. And with this positioning, similar to this today, in which organizations or individuals start talking about their success stories. What best than running a hall of people attending of 25, 30, 40 people, 50 people, whatever the number is, from the whole ecosystem, the MENA region and beyond, to listen to someone who have successful stories, successful impact, a great model, to promote, then this will start sticking in the minds. And then after that webinar, or people start connecting and engaging with each other, similar to what we are doing today. And actually, because of these webinars, of course, because of the COVID-19, before it was like big conferences that costs a lot of money and it's not efficient enough. Now it's going through these webinars in which we can connect. But it's all about learning and connecting. And then after that, you need to capture, which is writing your proposal. So you have all the information necessary, like in the about page of DARPE. 1 minute, please. So you have accordingly, when you write your proposal, so you have all the information you need, to write a good proposal. As DARPE is a tender grant opportunity focused, is a project focused. The center is the tender, the opportunity itself, the request for proposal or request for application or expression of interest, which we collect daily basis. Then you start writing your project understanding very well. Then you have a client focus understanding. So you have good proposal written. You understand your competitors as well, because DARPE link these tender grants opportunities with potential partners, grantees, non-governmental organizations, private sector, and others who have worked in the same country with the same client. So you may understand or imagine who would be your competitors or potential partners. And as well as we have recently started to handpick solutions, development solutions, the way mechanisms, implementation mechanisms from these different tenders and the grants opportunities, which we believe are vital knowledge documents, these RFPs and RFAs, in which we show the different approaches and methodologies of developing, of designing and delivering development aid funded projects. So DARPE members can access, and even other DARPE members, it's an open access, can access these articles so they have knowledge. By the end of the day, you have all the information and the thought, the food for thought, ready to put it into a template for a proposal, for a winning proposal. And as well as we have, as DARPE, have created an online proposal development tool in which you can start writing, following the template in an entrepreneurial way. Why you think you are different? Why you think you understand the client? What's a project understanding? What are your winning themes? In which accordingly, you can start drafting your early draft, which is 30% of writing the proposal, but it is the main and the core part of the proposal writing. And then you continue after that, you edit, you enhance, you improve, and so on. So we just to know that we collect data from thousands of sources, actually. Even we are much more than any other competitor in the region or even globally, because we get every single opportunity from private sector consulting firms, if the like say RTI, Chemonics, EECOM, those American firms or British ones, similar or European from the north actually, and similar to local NGOs, we collect every tender document. That's so. For instance, here is the today listing of consultancy assignments and the grants in Turkey from the World Bank, Internews. This is a private consulting firm in Iraq, and Relief organization, another one, and so on. And Expertise France, it's a semi-private government in Syria, and so on. In Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, we cover everything. So you will not miss any opportunity. As well as I want to show you again this mapping exercise we are doing in DARPE. It's a huge activity in which we map organizations all over the Middle East, what they do, who they are, what they do, and how they do it, and who you can contact with real persons' contact information. Starting from Palladium. Palladium, for instance, is an American U.S. development consulting firm, then the African Development Bank, then an American Relief, and so on. Ittihad al-Amal al-Nisa'i, Action Against Hunger, and we have, as of today, we have 3,396 organizations active, designing, implementing, and funding development aid projects in the Middle East. Webinars in our webinars, actually, we call it a learning and networking webinars, and it's in which we invite and host partners, prominent partners, to talk about their solutions, or talk about even sometimes not their success stories merely, but also learning and training webinars in which our members, our audience, can learn, and from learning they can develop a better proposals winning. And when they learn, it's not only for winning per se, but even the design of the programs from the proposal stage is stronger. This will lead to development aid for the people we work in the Middle East, women, children, and youth. This design, these projects are more effective because it comes from thought, leadership, and learning. Today, I'm sorry, I exceeded my time for 5 minutes. Today, I would like to introduce Jessica Mjabber from Lebanon, from Qualisus consulting firm, development consulting firm, who will walk us through today a very, very nice presentation, a very, very nice needed topic. All non-governmental organizations, consulting firms ask about why our relationship is like a hit and run. Why we start with a proposal award, we start with a project, and then we start issues with the client, and then it ends up with the client is not repeated, and we are not anymore the preferred client or donor agency, supplier, or a provider of professional services. This kind of it seems it's a mindset shift, whatever. But today, Jessica will go us through that because she has great experience in repeated clients. Clients are repeatedly work with her with Qualisus Consulting of Lebanon. So we are proud to have and pleasure to have Jessica Mjabber from Qualisus Consulting with us today. Jessica, it's your floor.
Thank you, Ala. Thank you so much. First, thank you for hosting us today. Thank you for all the opportunities, and I mean this fruitful collaboration that already has been going for more than a year now. So thank you, and I hope that everyone that joined today and is joining actually will benefit, will enjoy the session. I would like to first introduce myself. Ala already did a quick introduction, but I'm Jessica Mjabber, and I'm the Managing Director of Qualisus Consulting. I've been working in the sector for more than 10 years now, across the MENA region, but also with headquarters of several and many different organizations, either in their headquarters in the US or in Europe. Most of the experience has been mainly in the MENA region and covering different aspects. I've worked in the field, I've worked personally in fundraising, and the past few years has been focused on working in the consulting work, which also directly or indirectly involves fundraising. More specifically about today's agenda, if you want, what we'll be covering and what we'll be talking about, aside from what Ala actually mentioned, we'll give you a quick introduction about Qualisus, what we do, and why we're actually presenting and conducting this webinar today. We will be discussing with you fundraising, and we're really hoping to have an interactive session with you. We will be covering the donor retention. Are we able to retain donors? Yes or no? Why not? What are we missing, or are we not missing, but we have not been actually putting the needed effort to retain the donor? And we've been focusing, as Ala said, on hit and run. We got the funding, we celebrate, we enjoy the implementation, and then we forget that we might actually lose it towards the end of the project. We'll be covering some of the strategies that we can be implementing, or we can keep in mind, at least once we have the funding, so we do not lose it moving forward. And we'll be covering, before talking about the general tips and the wrap up, why donors continue and stop giving. And again, you will notice that in each of the sessions, we're actually hoping to interact with you. Please feel free to write on the chat box. I do not mind, and I can actually answer as we talk and as I'm presenting. So please feel free to either raise a question or provide us with any input that you may have, because I also expect that most of you have already worked on fundraising. And I'm sure we can also benefit from this session to share some best practices and some lessons learned from fundraising. Moving on to our first point, and just to give you a quick overview about Qualisus. So Qualisus is a social development consulting firm. We're based in Lebanon and in the UAE. And we work, just like DARPE, with both private and public institutions within mainly the MENA region. We work to increase the impact and the efficiency of the social interventions. And here, that is actually possible because we cover three ranges of services. We work on research. We work on producing research for decision makers or for agencies to be able to implement based on informed decisions and data. We provide services under quality assurance, and that's mainly known under the NGO world, let's say M&E. So we work on baseline, on midterm, on end term, and on evaluations. And finally, we work on resource development. And here we did not call it fundraising, but that's what's usually and commonly known as fundraising. Under resource development, we work on fundraising strategies, we work on proposal development, and we work on supporting agencies to actually either pre-position themselves or to be able to retain donors. I'd also like to highlight specifically this point that it's important to look at it from two angles. So there's the resource development and the fundraising that we provide as a service, but there's also the fundraising that we do as an agency. And I would say that the method, the strategies are quite similar, if not the same. It's just that the approach and the person or the stakeholder that we're dealing with might be different at times. So now I would say let's talk beyond the proposal. So we can actually start by hearing your thoughts. I'd like to ask you please to go on menti.com. So you can see that already on your screen. If you can from your phones, by the way, or the laptop. If you click on menti.com, you'll be asked to use a code, and the code is already on your screen. If anyone is facing any difficulty to open it, please let us know, or else we'll be asking you a few questions and your answers will be popping on the screen as you actually write them. So the first question, okay, I already see that we have participants that are already answering. The first question is, what are the three key terms that cross your mind when you mention fundraising? So when we're talking about fundraising, so I already have someone who's mentioning mobilization, donors, four, five. I'll wait a bit and we'll see the redundancy will actually show us. The bigger the word is, obviously, the more participants are mentioning it. I can't open the link. So what you need to do is actually put menti.com on Google and it would directly take you to the needed link. So I think donor is still the main key term. We have mobilization, proposals, adoption, we're still waiting for the rest. We have 12 actually who joined so far. Concept note. Proposals. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the top three that are popping, we have donors, definitely. We have money, communication, mobilization. Then we have other keywords that have not been actually used by or mentioned by several. We have engaging, we have negotiation, accomplishment, common interest, cultivate relationships, shared values. We're halfway through, so we have so far 16. Donor still takes it over, yeah? All right, perfect. So I think we will be definitely covering the donor aspect in several of the slides and the points. We will also be talking about communication, that's for sure. Mobilization, and I think there are others that called it engaging, mobilization, communication. We will be covering all of these, and I definitely would love to hear your thoughts around these points. We'll move on to the next question. Please stay on Menti. And I think you will already see the next question. Is fundraising considered a sales job for you? And for the ones who are saying yes or no, if it's possible for you to write in the chat box briefly why you think it's yes and why you think it's no. Okay, we have a tie. Not anymore. Very close. I would love to hear from you guys, if you can write on the chat box why you think it is a sales job and why not. So so far more think that it's a sales job. It's about partnership and communication. Okay, so far now we don't have a tie anymore. We have 80%, let's say, that think that it's a sales job. Actually a bit less. And then the rest that think not. I'm reading as you're writing, yes, because we're having to convince donor to spend their money on you and your organization. Sales in terms of promoting the product, project, program, which you need to fundraise for. It's more of sustained commitment to perform certain activities, concurrency, attempting to sell something as much as I'm trying to advocate for something and create a shared responsibility. Very interesting. And I think that was a trigger question, to be honest, because this is quite a discussion when it comes to fundraising. Some people believe that fundraising requires sales skills, which means that we want to sell what we can achieve as an organization, as individuals, and the product is definitely the service that we're trying to provide and the people that we're trying to help. At the same time, others think that sales is for the private sector, it's for the product. So it cannot be that NGOs use or rely on sales skills. If I'm not mistaken, I'm also getting direct messages from you, which highlights both opinions. So in a way or another, we're not selling a product, we're advocating, while others are highlighting that it is a sales job because we need to sell the process and what the agency is looking to achieve. Sales process. If you're to ask me, I'd be the one who would go with yes. I think it's a sales job, not in terms of selling a product, but rather using the sales skills to convince the donor, to convince whomever wants to fund you that you're able to achieve, that you know what you're talking about, and that you can actually deliver on time with the needed quality and with the needed expectations. So thank you for everyone's input for that one. We're going to move on now straight into the donor retention component. So if I'm not mistaken, most of you, based on the registration, based on the information you have filled prior to working and prior to joining the call today, you have worked on fundraising directly or indirectly. And some of the key questions that we have in mind and that we usually think about when we talk about donor retention is, what is the average donor retention or donor rate among the nonprofits? And here it would be interesting for you guys, for the ones who work in fundraising, to tell us a bit more. Do you have a high donor retention rate, a lower one, you're able to gain lots of funding, but it's once off and the donor does not fund you anymore. What is your current status and what is your current experience when it comes to donor retention? From my side, again, I have this experience coming from both angles, having worked myself on fundraising, having led team and departments regarding fundraising, having provided consultancy services to agencies when it comes to fundraising, or as a consulting firm ourselves, the fundraising efforts that we have been doing ourselves. So from your side, what has been your average donor retention rate to date, or from experience when you were working on your trying to work with donors on an ongoing basis? Nice. So we already have Caroline that's telling us that we work with donors on an ongoing basis and some donors for 10 years plus. It could be for both. I would go more with institutions, but for the individual ones, especially when it comes to sponsoring or supporting the program, I would say that's more relevant at HQ level, but both would actually work, because I know that the individual effort and the effort that organizations put to ensure that you have individual donors that are funding you over the years requires a lot of effort. So that's quite important there. 70% retention rate on average by keeping up the communication, maintaining them close. Okay, we have very actually high retention rates in the groups and the participants that are with us today. Okay, and since most of you have had, and at least for the ones who have been sharing the information, 10 years plus, 70% retention rate, how did you manage actually to have this and to improve this donor retention rate? Because most of the people and most of the challenges that are usually faced is that, again, agencies focus either on producing lots of proposals to gain donors, to gain funding. Once they gain the funding, they're running, trying to implement a project. And then they're actually not focusing on this open communication, on the needed follow-up, on ensuring that you're able to actually retain this donor. So at times, yes, agencies are able to retain a donor for a year or two, but then all of a sudden, although it's usually not all of a sudden, but for the agency, it goes to actually losing after 2-3 years of having secured this funding, of feeling comfortable as an agency that, yes, we've built this partnership, we've been working with this donor, and here we go, we lost actually this donor this round. So those are just few questions for us to be discussing during the webinar today. Why we lose sometimes, why we're unable to retain the donors, and how can NGOs or and I would be calling them later on in the presentation, fundraising focal points. How can and what are they supposed to do to ensure that you can retain donors? I'm calling them fundraising focal points because I know that each agency, each firm might call them differently. At times, it might be that the project manager or the programs manager is responsible for fundraising, while in other cases is the fundraising or a grant person, or in some agencies, it's the head of mission that's responsible for fundraising. So that's why, so we're on the safe side, let's say, in that covers everyone's role, depending on the agency. We'll be calling them fundraising officers or focal points. The first point that we'll be discussing in relation to donor retention is client stewardship. And what we mean by client stewardship is actually ensuring that, and here by the client, it's what others might call also donor, depending on the angle that you're looking at. It's to ensure that there's this stewardship and this ongoing communication with the donor. To be able to achieve this, it's important to continuously ensure that you're communicating. And I know that already from the first questions when we said fundraising, many of you already highlighted communication as a key factor and as a key term after donor. It's easily said, a bit harder to be done, specifically, for example, when you face challenges. So anyone who's implemented and worked on the field know already that once you get a funding, everyone's very happy. You start planning and the challenges start. Specifically, if we're talking in regions where crises hit or multifaceted crises are there, and it's less of a development setup. So here we're looking at continuous challenges. And the discussion itself is usually triggered internally within agencies. Should we tell the donor? Should you try to fix it before we tell them? Should we actually hide it and not tell them? My experience says that you need to actually continuously share with the donor, but share not to tell them, hey, you know, we're in trouble, or that's the challenge. I don't know, we don't have internet, there's no electricity, people are not cooperating, and what can we do? The point of ensuring this open communication and the continuous challenge sharing, it's to suggest solutions and it's to discuss with the client or the donor potential solutions. So that's quite important to ensure also that you're building trust and you're actually open with the client or with the donor. At the same time, we don't only have challenges, we sometimes have success stories. And when I say success stories, I'm not only referring to success stories that are usually required part of our reporting template or part of the compliance template. I'm also talking about success stories that we may see, that we may encounter during the project implementation or during our achievements or implementation, and we might miss. It could be a feedback or input or an impact that we felt on the people. It could be internal processes that we came up with for the project to be achieved, to ensure efficiency, to ensure the quality, to ensure even an innovative approach in the project. So, and sometimes we just simply miss it. Again, what I'm saying might not sound completely new, might not sound like rocket science. It's just important to make sure that we're aware and we're actually implementing this. Because again, from experience, having worked on fundraising from an NGO perspective or from an external perspective, agencies frequently come to us to ask for support, to retain donor, to work with the donors. And they think that, or the expectation at times, it's as if the solution is a magical solution or a solution that no one knows about. No, it's not this. It's just that we need to be aware of the resources that we have at hand, and we need to mobilize these resources. And when I say resources, those are people, but in some cases, it's situations. And here it's success stories, what I'm referring to. Progress snapshots and meetings. And here what I mean by this is that, yes, donors have their own requirements, monthly reports, quarterly reports, yearly reports at times. Those are set. What I'm talking about in progress snapshot and meetings, it's really you as an agency or as a firm requesting these meetings. You actually taking the lead when it comes to the communication and providing updates. From our side, for example, as Qualisus, most of the times when we take on assignments, we ask for weekly or bi-weekly meetings, and the meetings are set throughout the whole assignment. They're set for maximum 30 minutes, and it's to discuss specific things. So it's not to waste anyone's time, and it's not to meet for the sake of meetings. It's really to provide an update. Usually work through dashboards. So it's to provide an update, or if we're to, for example, get an approval, we always send it before these meetings. So the partner or the client has the time to review, to check it. And during these 30 minutes, and we really stick to 30 minutes, we clear these points. So that's also something important that you can take the lead on. And that would allow you to have an open communication and to be able to keep this relationship, specifically the progress that's beyond just writing a report itself. Those are also summarized in what I call effective and continuous communication. And here there's a lot of communication. There's the communication, which is informing the donor, reporting, replying to the emails, getting back to them. There's also the communication that is related to the visibility, ensuring that what you're doing is actually visible, ensuring that if you have any issues or if you discovered new needs, new topics, you're able to communicate this to them. And finally, it's the donor engagement. And why I'm actually putting this as a separate point from the communication or from the progress. It's really, and I'm hoping now that with post-COVID, we're able to go back to conducting field visits. COVID did not allow this for a while now, and it is definitely quite difficult to show the donor what you've been doing. And again, it's not showing them because they have a field visit. It's you asking them to come to your offices. It's you asking them to actually come to the field, to show them, to talk to the people, because that also shows quite a different approach and provides a different approach than the set meetings. You might tell me, yes, but they might not be available. It's true. It might not work with all your clients or all your donors, but it's already one step forward to ensure that you have this open communication. And why is this important? It's quite important because, again, as I told you, some agencies are quite happy. They've been taking the funding for years and they've been sitting on the safe side. So yeah, we're always sending the report. It's fine. We send them emails. No need to keep this relationship. You know, they're busy, we're busy. And all of a sudden, you notice that there are other partners that have either been funded or have not been funded who actually stepped in the new round of funding. And you're like, okay, where did these come from? We've already been funding for years. They're quite happy with what we're doing. So why do we have a new competitor or someone new that jumped in? And the someone new is actually ensuring that this is taking place, and they're using some fundraising strategies, or at least that's what we call it. And the fundraising strategies actually include utilize positioning statements. And here that is applied pre-funding and post-funding. So it's important that you position yourself before you get the funding, but it's equally important to keep these positioning. And I'd love to actually hear from you, just if you can write it on the chat box, if, or at least the ones who have worked or have positioning statements, if you can tell me about this. Sometimes I talk about it and people are, yeah, but we've never done this. We just go and talk to the donor. So for the ones who have worked on positioning statements, if you can actually let me know just here on the chat box. The positioning statements are quite important. Many of us take it for granted. So yeah, they already know us, they gave us funding. So what are you talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is to ensure that you actually are clear and you are presenting yourself to the donor. They have funded you, the client gave you funding, you still need to prove yourself. It does not mean that they know you, they will always fund you and they will not look somewhere else. And while you're sitting in the safe side and in the safe cocoon, I would say, other partners, other agencies are preparing themselves. They are preparing their positioning statements. They are looking at their competitive edge. They're looking around. Yeah, you might be doing this. We can make it for either cheaper, better quality, better design, more efficient way, better structures. So it is very, very important to ensure that you're still able to show your competitive edge. Getting the funding and implementing it does not mean that you can do it over the years. And this does not mean that someone else cannot come in and take your actually place or step in. And it's actually, I wouldn't lie to you, it's actually a strategy we use as Qualisus. So many times we do not take, for example, we apply for bids. We might lose or win the bid. If we win it, we actually look around what was our competitive edge beyond what we think is our competitive edge and what made us win this grant or this project. If we do not win it, first, we always ask to get feedback. And second, we start looking around. We start looking around not to see only who got it, but to look at the competitive edge of the agency that got it and to try to see where's a weak point or where might be a blind spot for these agencies. And that's where we jump in. And we start positioning ourselves and we start actually providing a step in. And again, that plays in both situations, pre-funding and post-funding. And again, for post-funding, that's usually a blind side just because agencies, NGOs, firms feel comfortable that, yes, we've always been funded by this agency. You know, it's fine, they know us, we can do the bare minimum. And I'll be talking in few about some of the mistakes or some of the few steps that we take for granted because of these things, and we end up losing funding, including I'm friends, I built this relationship, yeah, but this focal point actually left or is about to leave, and you have a new person, which means you have to prove yourself again. You need to highlight your competitive edge. You need to ensure compliance in language. And here it's quite an important point. Many agencies that approach us for fundraising or to retain a donor only speak their language. So for instance, I might call a program, for me internally, that's livelihood. For the donor or for other agencies, that's youth programming or youth empowerment. Or women's economic empowerment could be under the livelihood umbrella or could be under the gender umbrella. And it's important that you keep this in mind as you get the funding, because what you called gender 2 years ago might now be called actually livelihood. And that's kind of linked with a point that I'll be covering in few, which is the change in strategy, in focus. So it's important that you continuously keep this compliance with the donor language, running webinars and workshops. And that almost goes hand in hand with the lobbying and advocacy. And why am I saying that it goes hand in hand? It's your visibility. You need to show that you got the money, but you're still there. And here it's there in sector working group, there in webinar, workshops, in events that are taking place online or not online. And it's not passively also joining, it's actually actively joining, being visible, participating. That when it comes to the webinars, workshop, providing input. From the other side, if you're specifically being funded or you have a specific expertise, it's quite important that you keep this active role in lobbying and advocating. And you might not necessarily work in advocacy, or you do not have an activity that's advocacy, but you can already do this through your posts on social media, as simple as this, through engaging with other actors. Again, you cannot take for granted that you managed to get funding for a while and just focus on the implementation. You need to keep this balcony dance floor approach. And I quite like this metaphor actually, because often when we get funding, we're quite busy. We need to get it running. Donors tell us, oh, you didn't start yesterday. We have lots of challenges. A lot needs to be done, lots of reporting. So we're quite busy on the dance floor and we kind of miss the view on the balcony. So it's very important to keep this balance between balcony and dance floor. And that's where it's always good to have this step back and say, okay, I got the funding. What am I doing to retain it? One of the things to do to retain it is to be able to implement properly. It's to be able to ensure that you're achieving the quality work. But there are also other things that are beyond this. And here also almost the last few points are to engage in knowledge sharing and data. We are seeing more and more donor requesting evidence, where we're looking at more research that are being produced, data that leads decision. Yes, it's true that most of the proposals request to have a needs assessment, request to actually have the needed data. Here, I'm talking about data that's not only limited to needs assessment. It's more from the implementation, from your experience, from what you've been hearing and seeing on the ground to produce data and research, and not only to produce a needs assessment or some data to be written in a report. And the final point in the fundraising strategy is what I call the ongoing assessment of historical and current funding data. And here, first, you need to have the setup. When I say setup, it's that you need to have a process where you track your fundraising, not only successful and unsuccessful, but from the ones that you have managed to get, how many rounds, were the rounds still the same? So if you're working in, again, livelihood or education, did you get the same program over the years, or actually it was livelihood and then it turned into gender and livelihood, or it turned into child protection livelihood? So it's important for you to understand historically how your fundraising has been progressing, where you've been losing, because throughout the years you will win, retain, or lose some donors. So doing this assessment will allow you to reshape and refocus on your fundraising strategies. You might feel that, yes, I have very strong positioning statements, but I have weaker presence. And here, I mean, after presenting briefly the fundraising strategies, I'd like to hear a bit more from you on your successes and challenges when it comes to these strategies. Have you been already using them? Have you been using them, but they've not worked and donors still decided not to give you funding? Or on the contrary, you've used them and you still managed to keep actually the funding? That's due to... I'm gonna just wait a bit for the chat box to see how has been for you with the retention. Okay, so here I'm getting a question, for example, what is a positioning statement? And thank you for this question. And that's why I was hinting at it a bit before, because I know that when we work also with agencies at times, they're like, yeah, but what is this? So a positioning statement is actually usually a one-pager. That's what we call it, and that's our understanding of it. If anyone else has a different understanding or uses the positioning statement differently, also please feel free to jump in. But the positioning statement is actually a one-pager that highlights you as an agency. It could be at times mixed up with a cover letter, but it's really to show your expertise. What can you contribute to? What are you good at? And what do you do? And it's usually limited to one page. And it's important to have it because that means that everyone within your agency will speak the same language. That also means that you as an agency, although you have a strategy and you might be working in 5, 6 different sectors, if you still have one purpose that you're trying to achieve and one direction. And that usually increases your chances of retaining and having a donor. And that's usually because it's a niche area, and that reassures the donor that you're expert in the matter, you know what you're doing, and this is your capacity, and this is what you can do. I wouldn't call it an executive summary. It's really to position yourself. An executive summary is a summary of what you can do and what you cannot do. You might not necessarily list everything that you're doing. You're just highlighting your strongest point and what you're known for, or what you want to be known for. All right, thanks. Now, if we want to move a bit more with the donor retention to the donor side, and aside from just the fundraising strategies, it's quite important that when we get the funding, we actually get familiar, and we get, I wouldn't say familiar, I would say we should become an expert in the donor strategic plans and donor priorities. And here, in some cases, the donor is based in country. In other cases, they're based in the headquarters. And that's also another important point to keep in mind, because sometimes a gap we've been noticing in most of the assignments that we've been working on, there's generally a gap in the knowledge and information sharing between headquarters and field offices, specifically when it comes to fundraising. So you're currently funded, the donor provides a shift at HQ level, you're still focusing on the same program, being unaware of the changes that happened. So usually that's less problematic when the donor is, or the client is on the ground, because you already are in a closer communication and you might already hear from them or from different partners on the ground. But it's quite important for you to keep this in mind. It's important to know their preferred method. And here, for example, that's specifically true and relevant with COVID and with all the changes. COVID pushed everyone to move towards online. Some donors are quite interested now to keep the online approach. It's cost efficient, you're able to reach people. In some cases, for example, when you're working with sensitive populations, you're able to secure their confidentiality and safety. Others actually do not want this approach anymore, and they're quite happy to go back to the face-to-face, while some want to actually keep this hybrid approach. In all cases, specifically now, because you may have noticed, I mean, all of you, many donors have been shifting their strategies. I mean, many dropped one sector, moved to the other, specifically post-COVID. Many actually are shifting in the approach, are shifting in the sector. So it's quite important to keep this in mind and to keep this expertise. I also got a question, how do you know your donor strategic plans and funding if it's not online? Well, you can get it from different ways. You can get it, again, as I mentioned, either from your HQ if you do not have direct access and you need to keep this communication with them. You need to keep asking your HQ, what is the donor doing now? What are the strategies? Is there a workshop? Are they shifting? What's happening? If you're in touch and you have actually a representation of these donor in country, you need to have these meetings that are beyond your ongoing implementation, that are beyond providing them an update on the program. It's really to understand what they're doing. One thing or one trick I've been working on with several agencies is that when the agency works on their strategy, they actually can talk to their current donors, approaching them and telling them, hey, we're doing a strategy workshop. We want to shift our approach. Could you either participate or you can do key informant interviews to actually get their input. And during these meetings, they can give you lots of hints that usually you're unable to capture if you're just doing the regular meetings or if your communication is limited to just sending the report and replying to emails or providing updates. Whatever is. From an HQ perspective, and here I'm answering a question that I received, you really need the same communication that you need to have on the field, you need to try to maintain at the HQ level. And it's really asking them, for example, as I mentioned, to actually provide you with a meeting to input into your strategy or to get an update on the general strategy of this donor for, I don't know, the MENA region, for Latin America, for Asia, etc. Recognize your competitors. And here, why is this last point important? I'm going to cover this, and I think, Ala, you might have a question, so I'll shift straight to you. Just the last point. Recognize your competitors and partners. And here it's quite important, not in general, but it's from a donor perspective. So who is the donor also funding in addition to you? Because whomever they're funding or whomever might be a potential partner will be the next one who might take this project from you and who might reduce actually your possibility or your retention with this donor. Ala?
Yes, Jessica. I just wanted to say that we are like 1 hour, 5 minutes to 12, so which is 5 minutes to go, which is the 1 hour, or I think the 1 hour and a half. That's right, or it's 1 hour, Jessica?
It's 1 hour, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so just we have like 5 to 10 minutes to go, but then I would like just to add something on the learning about donors' priorities, and which is very interesting. And this is, I think, any successful relationship is all about client focused, and to be client focused. Even the proposal or even after the proposal. And the learning donors preferred implementing approaches. One day I asked a USAID official, how can I know what USAID will do later on? And he told me, go and read the country strategy program, of USAID in Egypt. And then I found that country strategy program is like, I don't know how many pages, hundreds of pages, that's so difficult for me to understand and read between the lines. As Jessica said, of course, this is one document to refer to. It's so difficult. But as Jessica said, nothing beats communicating and talking to clients. And this in which you have to have the skills of asking right questions and trying to have a fruitful, as again, Jessica said, of a half-an-hour meeting to get what are their priorities are. But then we found there are so many knowledge here and there that you can read easily and you can understand funding priorities. One of the most important ones are the requests for proposals. Clients issue Care International, Save the Children, USAID, and others. They issue requests for proposals. These requests for proposals are designed and prepared and written by client staff members, officers, specialists in different departments. So they write these RFPs, and it takes them time to write it and develop it. So reading the latest requests for proposals and even recruitment of mystery client or this client will indicate to you a lot of existing previous one and a lot of funding priorities and strategic directions and activities and even preferred implementation approaches like online training or like remote monitoring and evaluation or like a decentralized relationship or decentralized way of implementing projects. So these RFPs are important documents to review, in addition, of course, to success stories here and there. And this will improve your understanding of the client. Of course, this is the least that we can do, but more relationship, there is nothing, as I said, relationship and partnership. When meeting with the clients, you understand more and more of the exact specific priorities. The written documents might not expose or explore these, but for أضعف الإيمان, what we do is to review their RFPs, their success stories, of course, to meet with them as well. Jessica.
Thank you. And specifically about the documents, something that's important, I hinted at this, and just not to take more time that has already been said, is actually the compliance and reporting. Aside from what I mentioned a bit before, which are and should be the role of the fundraising focal point. They should be the one communicating. They should be providing updates. They should keep this balcony set up for the agency, whomever they are, whether they're the project manager or the focal point. Something that I personally used to hate when I was on the field, reports. Why do they want reports? Why do they want M&E data? It takes time, and we're focused on actually implementing the project. But with time, I learned the hard way, probably, that reporting and compliance are quite important. And they're important not only to tick the box, but they're important to actually reassure the donor that you're compliant, that you're able to achieve, and that contributes a lot. And a quick hint for the ones that may not know, some agencies, specifically for the UN agencies, they have a system. So whenever, for example, you do not report on time, the system on itself automatically goes red. So it's not that a person says that you're not performing or that you're late, it automatically goes red. If it goes red, that means that you're delayed, which indirectly means that the agency is not performing, although you might be doing the most beautiful project on the field. So reporting, compliance, reporting, and here it's the narrative, it's also the M&E data, are quite important. Again, I know specifically for the field staff or people who are busy producing lots of work, that's the least of their concerns. But I find it to be quite important because agencies do not take that usually seriously, or because reports over the month, it's almost a copy paste. Oh, background, there are no updates, let's copy paste it. And just put few inputs here and there. And those are important things that, in addition to the communication, in addition to ensuring you're in touch with the donor, that you're compliant, that you're able to actually deliver this. And I have a question here. I got a question in terms of UNICEF, for instance, have this. You're asking me who has. UNICEF does have the system whenever you do not submit, and it's not the narrative, it's the narrative and the financial. Their system internally goes red. And that's why the focal point usually comes back to you and say, hey, where's the report? You're late. So it's important to reassure your donor. It's important to show your donor that you can meet stringent compliance requirements, specifically for the high value donors. Some donors are quite flexible. They do not have such difficult requirements, but it's important to show your donor that you can implement properly, you can keep this communication, and you are able to abide by the compliance requirements. And specifically with the requirements, I also mean the M&E data, because that is the data that showcases your work. That is really when the donor cannot see what you're doing on the ground, the data and the reports are the reflection of what you've been doing. So producing timely and high quality donor reports are very important to actually keep this relationship. And Ala, I'm not sure, because we've covered some of the few things here as we were talking and from the questions that I received. I'm not sure if you would like me to stop here and take any additional questions from the participants.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Please go ahead. Yes. Let's have questions from the participants if anyone has a question. But let me start something. I have I recorded some of the questions. So once someone said that, what is the ideal retention rate and of donors? By the way, retention rate equal preferred provider or consulting firm or an NGO. And sometimes we call it unseated. No one will be able to seat you away because you are strongly positioned in that. So unseated or preferred supplier or preferred provider. This is what we are all trying to achieve. And was and that part of that, what we need always to achieve is the 70%. Someone said 70%, which is high, I believe. I'm not but I think the best, the idealistic is between 60 to 80%. To keep 60% of the clients repeatedly and 40% you lose. This should be a good performance standing, but more than that is a greater greater performance record, and less than that is it's a weak point, and you have to question mark why you are not keeping your partners, our clients' retention and continue giving you money. I remember a project of USAID in Egypt started in 1980, and then the same company, it's called Netcaf and Eddy, retained the project 5 years after 5 years after 5 years until 2010, 30 years. No, any competitor has been able to unseat them because first of the great performance they have, secondly, because the great relationship and the client relationship they have, and because of the dynamism. It's a dynamism relationship, keeping relationships alive, like any relationship, any partnership between people, this dynamism, otherwise it will be dead at the end of the day. So this dynamism of communication, of challenges, discussing challenges, as Jessica said, discussing outcomes and outputs from the monitoring and evaluation staff to discuss with the client for further expanding or scaling up or changing in the methodology. Everything, this dynamism, al-haraka, helps keeping the relationship healthy and continued. Otherwise, I remember that the relationship will be dead actually. And then there was and this is the question I would like to ask Jessica. Jessica, you have the question about fundraising is sales, yes or no? Why don't have a maybe or both?
So that question is quite problematic, and that's why we did not want to offer an halfway through answer, because some people take it quite offensively, and that's why I was very interested to hear from the participants today, because some people specifically work in the nonprofit, like sales is almost disrespecting the sector as much as this, while others actually go for, yes, it's just the skill of selling. It's not that we're marketing, that it's not with the spirit of the profit sector. It's just the skill of showing that you can do it, you can properly do it. And that's why I said, from my part, I'm with the people who think that you need this skill. It's quite difficult to try to convince a donor if you do not have even basic communication skills, if you do not actually, and you're unable to show that, yes, as an agency, we can produce, we have the needed resources, we have the needed knowledge. So that's why we did not want to leave this leeway, because some might have chosen maybe as an escape from the answer.
The last question I would like to ask you is, Jessica, I remember that you had just one day, you mentioned that you have been able, Qualisus yourself has been able to extend a contract from 2012 until 2018 of extension. What is that the one or two secrets that you have applied in order to expand your programs with the same donor?
The secrets that I shared today, so proactive communication, but again, we can easily forget about this. And that's why I emphasize it's proactive. It's not waiting for them to ask me. And once they ask me, I say everything that I know and update and let me sell what I'm doing. It's really proactively engaging and going towards the client. And that's why I suggested, we used to do this. I mean, when I used to be employed, we're doing this at Qualisus. We yesterday won another project with the same client. So we managed to retain them for another project using this approach, the dashboard, ensuring that we are able to achieve, but we're also actively showing them the progress and what we've been doing to be able to achieve this. So for me, as basic as it sounds, and because I've worked on the field and I know how easily we can forget this, how easily when we get an email, send me a progress update. Yeah, I'll get to that. It should almost be we give an update before we receive this request, before we're asked to say, what have you been doing? You disappeared for a month. Tell me what you're doing. And a very good understanding of the shift. So it cannot be that you're comfortable that you're getting funding in education, for example, and the donor is slightly starting to shift, for example, from early childhood to youth. You cannot be that blindsided and not see that they're already starting to ask about this. Because the second you sense this, you start positioning yourself to say, I can also do this if you're looking to shift partners and sectors. So for me, those, if there are two takeaways, those would be the two most important takeaways.
Excellent, Jessica. Thank you very much for that inspiring presentation today and talk. And I would like to thank everyone who has attended this interesting presentation from Jessica about how to retain and continue retaining and building trusted partnerships, not only to raise our level of revenues, I mean, winning contracts and grant awards, but also trusted partnerships lead to better developmental results on the people we serve, of men, women, and children in our area in the Middle East. And this is what we call trusted partnership, always have fruitful results on the development effectiveness. For just to close out, we will post this presentation and this webinar recording on DARPE website. So you can, at any time, you can go to DARPE website webinar section starting from tomorrow to see the webinar recording. And if you have any question, you just chat with us or just send us an email at info@darpe.me. And we are happy to hear from you. Thank you, Jessica, again, very much.
Thank you. And I just want to also thank all of Qualisus team. Layal has been supporting us today. She and all of the team has been working quite hard. For the ones who don't know, the situation is not that easy in Lebanon for the time being. So I want to also use this opportunity to thank them.
Thank you so much. And we will, as I said, we will share the presentation and you will have Jessica, the email that you can talk to Qualisus and you can talk to DARPE as well. Thank you so much. Have a nice time. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Bye.